junior high, I was lucky enough to have a theater arts department. And I was, came from a sort of traumatic kind of childhood, and I had put myself for survival in a sort of fog.
On the surface, Sally Field's life looked like Hollywood magic, but behind the scenes were dark, unspeakable secrets. From childhood trauma to near-death tragedy, every chapter of her life has had its fair share of heartbreak that only a handful know about. At 78, old age is catching up very fast, and one can't help but wonder, how much pain did Sally Field have to endure? And what secrets are there that the world is yet to know? Join us as we find out what Sally Field's life looks like at 78. Sally knows how to keep her secrets. Sally Field grew up in Pasadena, and to anyone looking from the outside, it was beautiful. Sunshine and rainbows and everything any child could dream of. Her mother, Margaret, was under contract with Paramount Pictures as an actress, so that added fame to the overall picture. The perfect family picture got tainted when Sally's parents got divorced when she was just 4, and her mother remarried to Jock Mahoney. He was a stuntman with active roles in Western films and television. To his fans, he was action and laughter on screen. But in reality, he was a different person. Life went on until Majani crossed a line shortly after Sally turned 13. He destroyed her sense of safety. And it wasn't a mistake because it became a pattern that went on for years. It became a burden she carried alone, and she will later talk about it and share how much it hurt her deeply, a pain she hasn't completely healed from. These experiences taught her fear, power, and courage, a lesson she had to learn a little too early. Her mother's silence didn't make it any better. If anything, it hurt even more. Margaret pretended not to see. Her inaction wreaked havoc on Sally's body and mind. It broke her daily. Sharing the experience many years later, she talked about screaming inwardly back then. Asking for help, although not voicing it out, she had hoped someone would pay attention long enough to save her. Still on her string of bad luck, she gets pregnant at 17. She had just graduated from high school, clueless about what was next for her life. Talkless of what to do with a pregnancy. She didn't get any emotional support then either. Instead, she was treated like a problem that had to be fixed. And her stepfather, to the rescue, took her to Tijuana. She was taken there for a removal, and after she woke up from the procedure, she was alone. Her stepfather was nowhere in sight. Just doctors and nurses who had done their job and left her to her thoughts and whatever trauma she was experiencing. Her mother was once again nowhere to be found when she needed her. Sally didn't let that end her story. With the right influence, voice, and resources, fueled by the pain of those experiences, she shared her story and openly advocated for women's rights and reproductive freedom. For her, it wasn't just another celebrity drawing attention. She was sharing a piece of herself and trusting that, in her little way, she could help another woman suffering in silence and let them know they are not alone. For years, she buried those stories deep, carrying the weight of it alone, and despite the pain, she kept quiet. Maybe for the sake of those involved. It wasn't until 2018 that she finally spoke them out loud in her memoir, In Pieces. Even though she wasn't screaming down microphones, she penned down her frustrations in a way that no one can ever shut down or erase. By then, therapy and time had helped her gather the strength to put it all down, to face the pain that had shaped her. Writing wasn't just for her, it became a lifeline for anyone who had lived in silence like she once did. One would think she had endured enough, but life had more waiting. At 42, Sally faced something that carved a mark too deep to ever fade. What happened that October morning? How bad was it? Near-death experience. At 42. If Sally had known any better, she wouldn't have gone out that day. October 29, 1988 seemed like every other day in Aspen, Colorado. Sally had been staying there for some time and was ready to go back home. By connection, she boarded entertainment mogul Merv Griffin's Gulfstream jet, a sleek private plane designed for comfort, not risk. She wasn't alone. With her were 3 family members. It was supposed to be a quick trip in style. Easy, right? Well, it wasn't. Flying private meant it was supposed to be safe, faster, and more reliable. At least that was her thinking before boarding. But there was danger ahead that none of them planned for. At around 11:30, the jet rolled down the runway and lifted off the ground into the thin mountain air. Aspen's airport has always been difficult. It sits high in the Rockies, more than 7,000 feet above sea level. Planes don't do so well there. Engines struggle. Pilots have less room for error, and that morning, those very challenges quickly became deadly. Seconds into the climb, both engines stopped working. There was nothing to keep the jet going in the air, and the plane had barely left the ground. Later, upon investigation, investigators explained that ice and snow from the runway had gotten sucked into the engines, cutting them off instantly. The crew had no chance to restart, and the emergency procedures were useless at the time because it was a little too late by the time they knew what had happened. Inside the cabin, Sally was fully awake, and she felt everything. The drop, the violent hit, the chaos as the plane tore apart. The cabin soon filled with smoke, and anything not tied down became a weapon, slamming into passengers. The sounds were overwhelming. There was screeching metal, glass breaking, people crying out in fear, while some said what they thought might be their last prayer. And yet, by some divine hand, when the firefighters forced their way to the wreck, all 4 people inside were alive. Injured, bruised, but alive. Sally had marks all over her body from the restraints, but nothing life-threatening. Her family members were battered too, but still safe and treatable. Investigators later shared that in an accident like that, survival went against the odds. Most crashes of that type ended differently. For Sally, though, the crash lingered in her mind. She suffered flashbacks and fought anxiety every time she thought about flying. For months, she relived that moment and completely avoided anything that required her to enter a plane or fly entirely. She relied on cars for shorter trips. It wasn't any safer, but at the time, her fear was stronger than logic. After she had looked death in the face, there was no forgetting. More than fear, the accident changed what mattered to her. Fame, awards, deadlines, those things, even though she was grateful for them, no longer carried the same weight as they used to. Her priorities changed, and what mattered most was family, personal peace, and making the most of each day. That October morning had shown her how quickly everything can vanish. The plane crash was just another chapter in Sally Field's long fight for survival. Because long before that October day, she had faced a more devastating battle. What could drive America's sweetheart to risk everything she had worked for? Why the Hollywood star almost destroyed herself. After the traumatic experience at 17, it seems fate was now looking favorably on her. Her breakthrough came early in 1965. Just 18 years old, she stepped into the spotlight as Gidget, the cheerful surfer girl who seemed to leap straight off a postcard of California youth. The show lasted only for a season, but the effect was long-lasting. Sally Field immediately got noticed and was branded as television's newest darling. Hollywood knew what to do with a darling. Executives saw what she was selling. She was the bubbly, wholesome girl audiences adored. They loved it and wanted her to repeat it, over and over again. In 1967, she gave more in The Fly-In Nun, the one role that would cling to her longer than she could have expected. As Sister Bertrille, the novice nun whose oversized headpiece allowed her to take flight, she soon had everyone calling her name. Viewers loved it. Critics rolled their eyes with nothing to say otherwise. But for Sally, the success felt like a trap. It soon became a box she could hear closing around her. Even then, casting directors wouldn't consider her for anything other than drama. Offers came in there, but they were all the same. Light-hearted sitcoms, simple characters, nothing that asked for depth. It was like they couldn't see anything other than the girl next door with a halo and wings. All the while, she grew restless, unhappy, and increasingly desperate by the day. It all boiled down to this moment, and then came the decision no one expected. In 1968, with her career riding high, Sally Field walked away from it all. She turned down the jobs that promised security and money. Agents warned her that if she didn't have a rethink, she was finished and would surely regret it. Instead of television sets, Sally spent her days in classrooms at the Lee Strasberg Actors Studio in New York. Here, she was no longer a sitcom star but a student, stripped of her old image as she went back to school. The training was harsh. It was like learning to crawl after running. Strasberg and his teachers forced her to dig deep, to find emotions she had long buried. It was grueling work. Many nights she was left doubting whether she had any real talent at all. Financially, it wasn't easy. She had given up steady paychecks and turned her back on the contracts that once made her secure. She still had some savings to keep her afloat, but she was hanging by a thin thread. From 1973 through 1976, things only grew darker. Depression became the order of the day for her. Soon, eating disorders followed. For her, there were no breaks. It was from one thing to another. And even though she knew she had made the right decision, she couldn't help the regrets she sometimes felt. She went from being the fresh face in comedy to people asking Sally who. But she knew she had more to offer than drama. She knew it, but convincing casting directors she was more was why she was back in school. The turning point came in 1976 with Sybil. Sally Field won the role of a woman living with multiple personalities, 16 distinct identities, each with its voice, posture, and manner. It was the kind of role that terrified her, and it became the performance that transformed her. Audiences saw a completely different Sally Field, raw and powerful. Critics who had dismissed her were stunned. The film earned her an Emmy Award, but more than that, it won her freedom. She had broken out of the box that once threatened to crush her career. The girl who walked away from sitcom stardom had returned as a serious actress. And this time, Hollywood had no choice but to take her seriously. With this new phase came new challenges unlike anything she had ever faced. Sally Field's hard-won recovery from a career she had nearly destroyed was about to meet its most dangerous test. How can love hurt so much that it destroys? Sally's toxic romance would leave her, broken and alone. Sally and Reynolds' paths crossed in 1977 on the set of Smokey and the Bandit. The chemistry was instant with an undeniable connection. Burt Reynolds was then at the very top of Hollywood, box office gold after hits like Deliverance and The Longest Yard. Field had just stunned critics with her performance in Sybil, shaking off the dismissive sitcom girl label. What began as a whirlwind courtship that lasted barely 4 days before they were inseparable quickly became one of Hollywood's most talked-about romances. But the glow dimmed as the reality of their dynamic became obvious. Reynolds, who was fiercely protective of his image and uneasy about his artistic credibility, began to exert control over Field's choices. He influenced the roles she pursued, the friends she kept, even the way she carried herself in public. Those who worked with them often noticed how Reynolds would take command of conversations, leaving Field in the background. It was important to him that she didn't overshadow him, ever. Behind the glamorous photographs of the golden couple, there was tension that few who paid attention could see. Reynolds often cut into her confidence, criticizing her work and belittling her ambitions. When director Martin Ritt offered Field the lead role in Norma Ray, a part that would prove career-defining, Reynolds told her it wasn't worthy of her. He predicted the film would flop, dismissing it as beneath her talent. Against his wish, she went ahead. Choosing to take the role anyway was a turning point. Field traveled to Alabama for the shoot, while Reynolds stayed in Los Angeles. The physical distance only sharpened the emotional one. As her independence was growing, so was his resentment, and what had started as love became a battle for control. By 1980, their fractured bond, or whatever was left of their relationship, became a public spectacle at the Academy Awards. Field had earned her first nomination for Norma Ray, a clear sign she had crossed into the ranks of serious film stars. Yet Reynolds refused to stand beside her that night, citing work conflicts no one truly believed. Hollywood insiders whispered about the snub, and the absence felt deliberate. When she won, she took the stage alone, her words echoing around the world, without the man she loved there to witness them. Reynolds stayed home, watching her triumph on television instead of sharing in it. That hollow space beside her said more than any tabloid headline. It was the perfect image of their imbalance. Her star was rising, but he was unwilling or unable to rise with her. Their split in 1982 was abrupt, even though it was a long time coming. Reynolds moved on, while Field threw herself into her career and her role as a mother of two. For nearly 3 decades, they would not speak, not even in passing at the countless Hollywood gatherings they both attended. When asked about one another, silence was the only answer they gave. It wasn't until 2015 that Reynolds broke the silence, telling Vanity Fair that Field had been the love of his life and that he had mishandled their time together. The admission was raw, but far too late, the regrets landing long after the damage had been done. Field herself never answered him publicly. By then, she had gone on to win a second Oscar for Places in the Heart, build a celebrated television career, and redefine what resilience looked like in Hollywood. The years with Reynolds had left scars, but they had also taught her the worth of her voice and the strength of setting boundaries. How has life been for Sally after the golden years? Reality of her old age. Sally Field is 78 now, and her life looks nothing like the story you have just heard. Even at old age, the same actress who gave the world unforgettable performances in Norma Ray and Forrest Gump still carries the grit and determination that defined her career. But aging breaks down even the strongest walls. Trophies and praise don't matter much once the body starts to weaken. Her days pass more slowly now. There was a time she could juggle rehearsals, family, and red carpets without missing a step. Now, even the simplest of tasks requires more thought, more patience, sometimes more help. Her home in Pacific Palisades, with its wide windows looking out toward the ocean, feels both like a comfort and a reminder. Back in 2005, Field went public with her osteoporosis diagnosis. At the time, she used her platform to raise awareness, hoping to help others understand the risks. 20 years later, the illness has taken its toll. Her bones are fragile, her movements careful, and every step is watched. The fear of falling follows her each time she walks. What she once fought for has now become her struggle, shaping how she lives each day. Money has never been the problem. With an estimated fortune of $50 million, Field is financially secure. But money cannot soften the sting of loneliness. She is still close to her 3 sons and loves being with her 5 grandchildren. But they live busy lives far away. Holidays, birthdays, and visits bring her joy, but once they are over, the quiet comes back. Time has taken other things too. Her eyesight makes reading scripts harder, and her hearing loss makes conversations, especially with groups, more challenging. Alone, these are inconveniences she could manage. Put them all together, and they were now barriers between her and the people around her. For someone who once thrived on connection and communication, these changes were not easy at all. The industry that once adored her has also moved on. For For actresses in their late 70s, roles worth playing are painfully rare. For Field, acting wasn't just a job, it was who she was. Acting gave her purpose and belonging, and losing that stage has left a huge gap that awards and memories cannot fill. Public appearances over the past few years show what time has done. She now walks more slowly, her voice is quieter and gentler. Her eyes show tiredness with such beautiful gray hair. Friends say her mind is still sharp, but age weighs on her body. She remains strong, yet even Sally Field cannot escape time. Sally at 78 is what aging looks like for everyone, even for the famous. Loneliness, weakness, and fading attention come with time. What moment in Sally Field's life moved you the most? Do you think Hollywood truly valued her strength and sacrifices? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.